Ave Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and the Pharisees take their seat on the chair of Moses. Therefore do and observe all things whatsoever they tell you, but do not follow their examples. For they preach, but they do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to carry, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they will not lift a finger to move them. All their works are performed to be seen. They widen their phylacteries and lengthen their tassels. They love places of honor at banquets, seats of honor in synagogues, greetings in the marketplace, and the salutation, Rabbi. As for you, do not be called Rabbi. You have but one teacher, and you are all brothers. Call no one on earth your father. You have but one Father in heaven. Do not be called master. You have but one master, the Christ. The greatest among you must be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, but whoever humbles himself will be exalted." The Gospel of the Lord. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Doesn't that sound like the fate of Lucifer? It's a caution for all of us in humility. But whoever humbles himself will be exalted, because there's only one high power, and he is the only one who can exalt, because everyone else is below him. And yet he lives to exalt us by giving his life in sacrifice for us. So he embodies the ultimate of what it is to be humble, but also the power to be giving exaltation to those who are humble with him. The prophet Isaiah jumps out of the gate in his prophecies in chapter 1. By verse 10, he has some very harsh words to say. "Hear the word of the Lord, O princes of Sodom. Listen to the instruction of God, people of Gomorrah. What an insult! What a castigation!" The text that we use for today omits a couple of verses that give you an idea of how serious the prophet Isaiah really is, who is speaking for God, and the gravity of which God is considering the situation. "I will close my eyes to you, though you pray to me the more. I will not listen to you." Wow. Yet despite such chastisement, God makes an offer of mercy. He chastises because he loves, the scriptures tell us. In other words, he wants to make us aware that a line has been crossed, a trust has been broken, but he's dying to repair it. But in order for that to happen, he must seek our solicitude and cooperation. I was reminded of all the times my parents said, "It's not as if we didn't tell you." Yep. Or the occasions my spiritual director counseled me and his counsel went unheeded, and I saw lots of rotten fruit in my spiritual life to follow. The scribes and the Pharisees, the Sadducees and the Herodians and the Zealots, these are all parties. Yes, political parties. Because the people of Israel were a theocracy. They were a governance, but based on God's law, not man's. But nevertheless, they were a government, and political parties stirred among them, and they all had their opinions. Not too much changes now, does it? And so they all have their opinions. And Jesus is confronting them today. People will tell me, they'll say, Jesus had nothing to do with politics. It's not true. Right here it is. They love places of honor, he says, and greetings. In other words, he's saying they demand respect for their title and their office. They demand it. And he, understanding political machinations, cautions them. Do not be called rabbi. Call no one father. Do not be called master. These are all descriptions of respect for primacy of God. And he is the only one truly qualified to take on these titles as the teacher, the Father, the Master, the Lord, and the King. And failing to see him as the model for faith and for morals produces a culture of hypocrites saturated with self-interest. Now, right now I have you intentionally all thinking about dirty politicians. But before politicians became politicians, they were individual, regular, normal people like the rest of us. And we have something in common with all of them. We are all susceptible to these things. Political parties begin with individuals who have ceased being introspective and challenging themselves to the truths of the Almighty, who is the Father, who is the King. Instead, we anoint ourselves in that primacy, taking our own word for the truth. And when that becomes common in the culture, you have morals based on what we call subjectivism and individuality, which all seeks to serve the culture of me, myself, and I, the anti-Trinity, as I have referred it to before. Jesus in the gospel is speaking to the crowd and the disciples. That's what it says here in the gospel. The crowd is that group that isn't really committed. They're observing, they're curious, but they haven't been pulled in yet. And Jesus challenges them. But it's also a challenge thrown down to his disciples, who are supposed to be his faithful adherents, seeking to really study and learn what it is to be like Jesus. The message here, actually, before we look at political machinations, the message is described and given to the human heart of each one of us to embrace the truth of Jesus Christ, whom he calls to be humble. That's what the calling is. He calls us to be humble and to look within, to take a Lenten gaze into the heart and ask for the grace to place him at the center and primacy of focus in my life. I'm not the teacher. I'm not the Father. I'm not the Master. I'm not the Christ. I look to the one who is. My teaching comes from Jesus. Anything else is a lie. My Father is God, the Father, and anything else is illegitimacy. My Master is the Christ. My Master is the one who calls the shots and the one I serve, not myself, not my self-interest, because these cannot get me to heaven. I serve the one who can elevate me to that height. So whoever exalts himself will be humbled, not by God's choice, but by God's justice for what we desire. Whoever humbles himself, however, will be exalted by the only one who can exalt. And those who he exalts to the greatest heights of heaven.
Regina Celi, letare, alleluia, quiaque merum isti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit, alleluia, ora pro nobis Deum, alleluia.